Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Think Like a Thought Leader show, where entrepreneurs, leaders, and change makers like you come to learn how to build wealthy legacies related to the work that you do in the world. And I'm so excited to have with me here Dr. Sunne-Ryse Smith. Dr. Sunne-Ryse, how are you doing
Hey,
today?
I am fantastic. How are you, love?
I'm doing well. Now, we're going to talk about giving yourself the gift of daily joy and abundance. But before we dive
Mm.
into that, I got to ask you, given everything that's going on in the world, the pandemic, the social
Mhm.
unrest, how are you doing? How are you faring these days?
Listen, I always tell people it's a day-to-day process, right? So you got to check in with yourself every day because once you've been home for this amount of time, I think in the beginning you were like, oh, this is perfect. I think I can manage this. And then you got to month 5 and it was like Groundhog's Day. You're like, oh, we doing this again. Oh, oh,
Right.
it's Monday already. Oh, okay. I thought it was Wednesday or Thursday. So
Right.
really, I think I started off like really fast, like sprinting out. And I think as the pandemic has worn on, as the unrest in our world has worn on, and as I've had to watch my children navigate through watching um, men of color and women of color be killed and murdered on television, I think I've come to a place where I just take it day by day and I'm ensuring that my practices support my mental and emotional well-being as opposed to thinking long term like girl what you gonna do in 2 weeks. I'm just like listen, let's get through today, let's make sure everyone's fed, and we're good. So it's been a day by day.
And you know what? If you're watching right now, I encourage you, watching or listening, I encourage you to
Mhm.
share this conversation with someone who you believe needs to hear it. Because it's important that we not only take care of ourselves, but we think of each other in this, because we are all in this together, and we're going to need each other to get out of it. So,
That's right.
um, as always, feel free to sound off and tell me what you think of this conversation as you're watching or listening by texting me at 404-737-4957. That's 404-737-4957. I'd love to hear what you have to what you think as we journey throughout this conversation. Now, Dr. Sunrise,
Mm.
let me share this with you because I don't know if you know this or not. You probably don't. Because I'm sure that you're the kind of person who impacts people that you've never met before because you are a powerhouse. I first experienced your work during the amazing I Am Woman conference hosted by the incredible Sylvia High. Shout out to Sylvia High.
Yes. Mhm.
Hopefully she'll tune into this. And I believe it was either 2018 or 2019. I can't remember the exact year, but you were the closing speaker, I think on day one, and
Mm.
you quite literally moved me and so many of the other women in the room. I was in tears. I'm a big crybaby anyway, but you
Mm.
really moved me to tears, and it takes a lot to do that because I'm a PK. I'm used to the charismatic, messages
Right.
and things like right. Like I'm used to it. But you came and you came with such I can't even describe your energy. It was enveloping. It was powerful. And my friend Renee and I talked about how powerful your message around living spiritually woke was, and
Yeah.
I never forgot it. And so I knew when I started this show that my audience needed to hear from you. So first, I want to thank you for the work that you do and that you continue to do to impact the lives of so many positively.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's an honor. It really is an honor. And let me tell you something. That conference that you are referencing, if I'm thinking it's the same one when I closed, if we had 2 hours, I could tell you what the journey was to that day. So what you were experiencing that day was years of God like pushing me, pulling me, I know your show is about thinking like a thought leader. It was God literally transforming how I think about myself so that I can transform how I impact others. And I know that the work that you do is really, I love what you do about helping people to think like what does that mean to really think? And I'm telling you that day, I almost like to say it wasn't necessarily me. It was literally the manifestation of what God had done in me, that I would not have been able to do that had I not had so many low lows up until that point.
And I felt that. I did not know you before, but I knew there was something working through you. And I was actually browsing on Instagram, I think it was last night or something, and came across this message that is so relevant to our conversation today. It said something like, a lot of people look at people's materialistic wins, but they don't know the spiritual wins that had to precede that. And so it sounds like you had to go through some things in order to even deliver such a powerful message.
Yeah, and you know what it is? I love it when you say it like that, because I think we as a society, the reason why the book is called Spiritually Woke is because so many people are alive and they're breathing, but their spirits are dead. And so a lot of the work that God has led me to do is around inspiration. And one day I woke up and the word, God literally spoke to me about the word inspiration. And when you look at the root word, it's to breathe life into. Right? So when we think of expiration or expire, that means something has ended. When you inspire something, that means you blow life into it and bring it to life. So Spiritually Woke was birthed around this idea that I myself was walking around looking at material things, thinking that I was alive, but there was just something inside of me that did not feel, I was breathing, but I was almost like dead, if that makes sense. And so this idea that when God works on us, God creates thought leaders, he's literally constantly breathing life into our visions, into our dreams, into our missions, into our goals. And sometimes that breath does not feel good. Ooh. Sometimes that breath feels like a punch in the chest. I'm a sports fanatic, right? So I watch football, I watch basketball. When somebody gets knocked out, they say, oh, they got the wind knocked out of them. Yep. Sometimes that's what God is doing when he's waking us up. He's literally knocking the wind out of us to wake us up to a higher level of what he wants us to vibrate on.
I completely agree. And it's almost like we have to die. The old version, a version of ourselves has to die before we truly ascend into that next level that we often pray for, right? I know so many people who pray the prayer of Jabez, right? Yep. God enlarge my territory. But what does that mean? What does that really mean?
Yeah, listen, enlarging your territory comes with responsibility. And so sometimes the process that comes before the enlarging, right? The process that comes before the enlarging is the preparation that we're able to manage what we're enlarged into. So one of the things you think about, right, for your thought leaders out there is you may be praying and asking God to expand your business or to expand your reach, right? But the place where you're going to go or who you would have to be when you get there, you may not be that person right now. So there's a refining process that takes place from here to there. And that refining process may include learning humility, learning patience, learning gratitude, learning joy, but you learn humility by being humbled.
Yeah. Right. And sometimes that doesn't always feel good. Like you said earlier, it doesn't always feel good. You know what? You're preaching to me today. I don't care if no one else gets anything out of this. I know that my cup is getting filled. Thank you so much. So, Dr. Sunne-Ryse, can you talk about the greater mission that drives your work?
Yeah, the greater mission for me is to breathe life into other people's visions and dreams, right? So I've always said that when I say I love seeing people walk in their purpose. I can watch, I'm a crybaby like you. So I can watch a performer on television, right? So I could watch Beyonce's, homecoming and cry. And my kids are like, why are you crying? I was like, do y'all see her gifting? Like she knows who she is in God. I can watch Barack Obama do a speech and cry, not because of the words, but you are literally seeing this person manifest who God created them to be. So part of the greater mission that God has called me to do is to inspire, to breathe life into people so that they can feel the purpose that God has put on the inside of them. Because I always say, you may know my good friend Vivian Anderson, right? She was at the conference, and anyone who knows Vivian knows that woman is out there transforming lives for young Black girls. Now, God didn't call me to do what Vivian does, but God called me to support her. God called me. So you get what I'm saying? So part of this work is when I see someone that has the vision to manifest a God-given talent, God has placed me in their life to breathe life, right? To bring revelation, to bring knowledge, and also to get them to a place of inspiration where they can move in the purpose that God has called them to do.
And one thing is clear throughout, I know, my personal journey, I recognized and I continue to acknowledge the fact that we cannot do it alone. I remember listening to a sermon by Pastor Michael Todd of Transformation Church in Oklahoma. And he talked about the difference he talked about purpose, right? And a vision. And I had never heard it put this way before, but he said that the difference between a vision and a project is something you can do by yourself, but vision is something that is bigger than you. And when we start to think about our purpose and we start to think about our vision, what I really want to impress upon those who are watching and listening is that if you have a vision that you believe God, the universe, your higher self, whoever has given to you, you cannot bring it to fruition by yourself. Thought leaders do not work in vacuums. So thank you for mentioning that.
And the beautiful thing about what you just said is any vision that has global reach, it's impossible for someone to do it by themselves. So anyone like your listeners that are sitting there and they're thinking about how massive this thing is brewing on the inside of them, right? That they can't sleep sometimes, that they're waking up and they're like, man, I got to do this. I got to do this. When you think of that vision and that goal and that plan, it's impossible. That's the key word. It is impossible to get there without a tribe, a team, a community, and a community that you don't know. Because sometimes we think community is only the people we know.
Ooh, let's get into it. Tell me more about that. Can you talk a little bit more about how your community can be comprised of people you don't know?
Well, listen, New York Times bestsellers, right? Let's use this as an example. A New York Times bestseller, if we were to sit them down in front of us and ask them to list all of the family members they know by name, maybe they could get to 30, 40, 50 people. But bestsellers are selling millions of copies. They clearly do not know all those other people who bought their books. So your tribe is the group of people that God has called you to. Your family, your close members, you're called to be with them, but you're not called to move them necessarily. So your tribe, the support, the people, you're called to move them. And that's not always going to be family. Matter of fact, it's not. It's going to be the people that you don't know in communities in far off spaces. I look at it this way. When someone prays, you don't know whether you're the answer to their prayer. Someone could be praying on the other side of this continent for what this show is offering. So every time you get on and you record, it would be short-sighted of you to think only your family is watching.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because you're someone's answered prayer, and you may never meet that person. You may never know that person. You may never even come to understand how you answered their prayer. But by you sitting doing this show every week, you are literally answering someone's prayer. And that kind of to go back to the original piece, that kind of large movement or global tribe cannot come from the small silo in which you inhabit.
Yes. And I think that what you just said is going to inspire people to think even bigger. And I hope that it does. So I remember hearing you share the story behind your beautiful name at that same I Am Woman conference that I mentioned earlier. And I definitely think it's worth talking about. So how has your name shaped your journey?
Wow. Woo. Listen, so the abridged version for your listeners, my mom was faced with a decision. You know, I'm the youngest of three, the only girl, and my mom is an immigrant from the Caribbean. She was faced with a decision of whether she was going to have me or not, because at the time, she and my father were not together. And she drove to Prospect Park in Brooklyn. Shout out to all my New York heads. She drove to Prospect Park in Brooklyn because she said she felt like God told her to go to the park. She drove in the park. My brothers fell asleep in the back. And she said that as the sun was coming up, she woke up and God told her to have me. And that everyone that I come in contact with, I would be the dawning of a new day. I would be a sunrise. Right? So I would bring new revelation, new knowledge, new awareness, new inspiration to everyone that I come in contact with. So initially you would think that creates a lot of pressure, but all I did was inhabit my name, as people would call me, Sunrise. I'd just be the name. I would be that sunrise. And now that as I've gotten older and more mature and lived some life and some career, some failed businesses, some failed a lot of things, right? Financial mistakes. I now recognize that as long as I'm alive, I'm a dawning of a new day. And I don't mean big time standing on a stage with 100 people. I mean grocery store on the line, just chit chatting with people, just leaving the goodness of God with everyone I come in contact with.
That is so powerful. When you said that you are the dawning of a new day, I like the hairs on my arms stood on end. Like I got chills because I truly believe that you embody that
Thank you.
so much. Now this month we're talking about how we gift ourselves the best life. And it's during this time of the year where people often start to create their vision boards and goals for the upcoming year. And many times, they talk about or they think about abundance. And it's mentioned in some way, shape, or form. But abundance it doesn't just include money. So how would you define abundance? Because we're going to get into your latest book, where you offer affirmations for daily joy and abundance. So how would you first define abundance for those who are watching and listening?
Abundance, I love the fact that you preface that question with abundance is not just about money. I think when in our society, when we have a lack of something, we have a tendency to make definitions fit what we feel we're lacking. So a lot of times, when you think of people and they want to use the word abundance, they apply it to money. And usually that's because sometimes it may be what they feel like they're missing. But the true definition of abundance is the fullness of all things. It is the fullness of all things, fullness of health, fullness of love, fullness of peace, fullness of prosperity, right? So even when we think, there's a scripture that my mom always spoke about, John 10:10, that Jesus Christ came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And I just want to preface that to your viewers. You may not believe in Jesus Christ. Maybe you believe in someone, a higher calling or being. Just hear the part that I said, having life and having it more abundantly. It's a Zoe life, meaning nothing is missing and nothing is broken. So as people enter into this 2021, you want to start thinking about, what does a full life mean to me?
That's such a good question that I hope everyone ponders, because 2020 was and still is a doozy for so many of us.
Mm-hmm.
So to really pose that question, because what that does, I think, is empowers us to truly be the co-creator of our lives. What
Mm-hmm.
does that fullness look like for you? So for those of you who are watching and listening, I hope that you're taking notes, because Dr. Sunrise has already been dropping gems. Okay, free game for the folks. now
Yes.
now you've co-authored a book entitled I Am That: Prayers and
Mm.
Affirmations for Successful Living, along with Dr. Lucille Farrell Scott. So what do you hope that
Yeah.
people get from this book?
Well, first of all, Dr. Lucille Farrell Scott is my mama. She gave me life. She gave me this name. And she is my spiritual teacher. Everything that I know, I learned it from that woman. And this is our second edition of this book. And we turned it into a journal, knowing that when people are able to put words that speak to what they desire, when they're able to put those words in their mouth and introduce it into the atmosphere, they become what you said before, co-creators. They stop sitting on the sideline waiting for things to happen, and they make a decision to be a creator. And part of being a creator is what you speak, what you say, the power of your words, right? It's this
Yes.
idea that I can have that vision board. I can take all that's step number one. I can write down the goals. I can write it in my journal. That's a definite important step. But every day you wake up, you got to have the manifestation first in your mouth, because the universe and everything around you will tell you something different. It will tell you whatever's on the news is a fact. It'll tell you so many things that isn't necessarily true. Do you know how many times I've had to catch myself because I allowed my words to speak what I saw instead of speak what I saw.
Whew.
Right? And my
Yep.
mother would always tell me that we can't allow our natural eyes to lie to us based on what our spiritual internal eyes have already told us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that happens sometimes. What we see on the outside will kind of impress upon us more as opposed to what we know to be true. So the
Right.
book is really just an opportunity for people to grab hold and be what you just said, a co-creator, an everyday decision. What am I going to believe? Am I going to believe the vision and the dream that's in me? Or am I going to believe some of the distractions that are outside of me?
And I think that your book is going to impact so many people on their journey, because again, I think 2020 it has taken everything and then some for some of us to get
Mm-hmm.
through. But having a tool kit, having resources that allow you to truly understand what abundance means for you, to truly tap into what your greater purpose and mission is going to be, is so important. I think that in itself, those things are lifelines for us,
Yeah.
because purpose anchors so many people. And if you don't already know your purpose, I think that your number one job is to figure out what that is, because everything else
Mm-hmm.
in your life is going to flow from that. Now, virtually anyone
And
watching.
one more thing to that, right?
Mhm.
Just to help people out. We've lived in a society where we think purpose is the big end goal result. And so people get really lost, and they get down on themselves, or they get frustrated because they look at, say, Oprah or Barack or Jay-Z or all of these different people, and they, in their minds, assume my purpose has to be this grand thing that everybody knows. Fame does not imply purpose.
Ooh.
Notoriety does not imply purpose. And I tell people all day, every day you're on purpose. Every day you're on purpose. Purpose is the fragrance that you leave in the earth every single day. It is what people say about you when you walk out of a room, right? So one of the things, how I found my purpose was people kept saying, damn, Sunrise, you're so inspiring. You're so inspired. That word became the purpose. So then I wasn't looking for some stage to be inspiring on. I recognized that I could daily be inspiring with my children, with my husband, with my girlfriends, with the mailman, with the girl bagging my groceries. So I just want particularly your listeners who are thought leaders and they're big, I want them to recognize their purpose is really anchored and rooted in the words and the fragrance that people say about them from a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And, I think that you make a good point about how a lot of people believe that fame and notoriety and popularity can imply purpose. And how can we blame people for getting that mixed up? Because we live in such a celebrity-driven culture, right? People are doing it for the gram, doing it for the likes, doing it for the shares, doing it for the comments. And so I think it's important for us to understand what purpose really is and how we can really tap into that. I'm going to reference Michael Todd again because...
Amen. Amen. Because that brother drops all the jewels. Yeah.
All the jewels. Yes. And he said something about platforms, right? Because I think a lot of us, those of us who are thought leaders, entrepreneurs, leaders, change makers, some of us, are thinking about, especially as the year comes to a close and as we contemplate what next year holds for us, we're thinking about, man, how can I build my platform? How can I expand my platform? Everybody wants a bigger platform, more followers, all that good stuff. Yep. But really, it's all about what you do before you get to those stages, right? That pave the way for you to get those invites, for you to get those opportunities, for you to get those visibility, those expanded chances for visibility, right?
Mm-hmm. It's what you do behind the curtain that sets the stage when you go in front of the curtain. Mm-hmm. It's what you do behind the curtain, right? So I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm thinking about the devices that we are communicating on. Somebody created those devices. There was a thought leader that created these devices. We don't know their names, girl, but they were on purpose. They Absolutely. Were living fully in their purpose. So like you said, it's what we do behind the scenes. It's what we do before the platform that really kind of sets the stage for where you go and who sees you. Because let's be clear, people respect authenticity. People respect honesty, and people respect integrity. So if you're really out there to transform, you're going to transform one person in a room or 10,000 people in a room. You're going to be that same transformer regardless of the size of your audience.
Indeed. Now, you mentioned this idea of our words being so impactful. And I know that virtually anybody that's watching or listening knows the saying that life and death lie in the power of the tongue. And as someone who is a trained writer and communication strategist, I believe to my core that our words have the power to shape our world. But still, some tuned in today might be saying to themselves, listen, Dr. Sunrise, I've tried affirmations and they don't work for me. Life for me largely remains the same. What would you say to those who are skeptical about the power of affirmations?
So here's the key to affirmations. Affirmations need to be combined with a sense of faith. So what do I mean by that? If what you're speaking is just throwing words out into the universe, then it's just words that are going out. An affirmation or a confession, which is very different from just saying words. An affirmation or a confession is combined with something internal. It's a belief, right? So where I was saying before, what is that thing that wakes you up? It is the words combined with what I believe. So a lot of people who say, oh, I've done affirmations, I've done this, I always challenge them. And I said, well, did you really believe what you were saying? And if you didn't really believe it, it's okay, because you don't want people to beat themselves up either. Part of the work, or part of this process, is truly being honest with ourselves. Sometimes we want to say affirmations for things that deep down in our heart, we know we don't feel we're ready for. So we'll go through the motions because someone told us to say the affirmation, because someone told us that this is a process or a spiritual tool or a spiritual practice that you should use. And then when we do it, we say it doesn't work. But when we really sit with ourselves and we say, okay, do I believe this? That's why I always tell people, you want to start speaking affirmations that have, for yourself, you can actually believe it. So I always tell people, practice with a parking spot. Practice with a parking spot, right? Like if you're shopping and you're like, okay, God, let me try this thing on, right? You start with a parking spot. You start with things that you feel like, you know what? I think if I speak this, I can believe it. Because part of it is, faith is a muscle.
Yes.
It is a muscle just like your body part. I'm not going to tell anybody to go in the gym and bench press 200 pounds. If they've never lifted 10 pounds before, it would be foolhardy and it would be spiritually irresponsible. The same thing goes for faith, right? So maybe some of your listeners out there have declared that they're going to be $1 million entrepreneur business next year, but they haven't yet fully believed that they can get a $10,000 client this year. That's where they want to be honest with yourselves. Where can you start? And then you start your affirmation and your confessions from that place, and you work your way up to the million. You work that muscle and that confidence in that word, because that's also building confidence in yourself.
I completely agree. And funny enough, I did start with a parking spot, just like you said, and I think the key to that is when you start, it's something that you don't have this super huge attachment to, right? And so, because I think so often we can get attached to a particular outcome or
That's right.
attached to how it's going to happen, that often sabotages the manifestation of the very thing we said that we wanted, right?
That's it. That is it. We get attached to, I always like to say, we pray and then we try to do it ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You pray and now, so I want to be clear, because this is such a great conversation, because I know some of your listeners are going to be like, well, are you saying that we're not supposed to do anything? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you pray and then you do what you have in your power to do, and then let God do the rest. But to your point, we pray and then we jump, God told me that I'm going to be a millionaire. So that must mean I'm going to do it by way of TV, or I'm going to do, and then you start in your own strength trying to do all of these things, as opposed to mastering the one little thing that he's given you responsibility over.
Ooh, I'm so glad you mentioned mastery, because that's really how thought leadership is built.
Yes.
And sustained is through mastery. And mastery really is literally beating on that craft, that one thing, practice, that consistency, right? A lot of people want a lot of things, but they don't want to be consistent. They don't want to show up when it's no longer fun, right? When it's no longer convenient,
That's right.
It's like you can't be so committed to convenience if you really expect if you really expect success. So I'm so glad that we're on this. Good. Because this is going to help people set the stage for this coming year, and like you said, work this faith muscle, because we can't trust what we see in front of us. What we see in front of us really is a past manifestation, right? It's old news.
Yes. There it is. It's a God. So when you really think about where we are, and when I mean where we are, I mean everybody, think about where you are in life today, in this moment. You can probably pinpoint a feeling, a thought, a word, an emotion that you experienced that now you're living in the tangible manifestation of it, right?
Yeah.
So my consulting firm is called Inspiration Matters, and it's a play on words. It's the idea that inspiration matters, it's important, but inspiration matters, meaning the substance.
Yes.
Right? So it matters in its two different forms of definition, right? So matter, substance. And you think of where we are today, we are living in matter, right? Of our thoughts, our words, our behaviors, everything. So what you're saying about what we're experiencing right now, what we're seeing is a projection of something from the past. It means we were co-creator at some point, and we're now living in the fullness of it.
And, you know, for some who might be listening or watching us talk about this, it could feel overwhelming. Like, oh my God, did I create this? You know, but what I really want to impress upon those who are tuning in is that this conversation is meant to empower you.
That's right.
Right? It's meant to empower you to be intentional about both your thoughts and your words.
And it's meant to uplift, right? Because once you are aware, right, nothing in the universe is evil. Nothing in the universe is established to bring us down or to bring harm to us. Our experiences, even the ones we do not like, are to be used to refine us, to develop us. And when we all, like to your point, when we start to experience life from that place, when we start to experience life from that mindset, when something happens that would appear to not be good, there's a perspective that we take from it that is not why is this happening to me, but why is this happening for me?
Ooh, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right? So to your point, it's not everything that we're saying is not to, oh my God, did I really think this? I said you were a co-creator. So meaning, right? So I'll go to another scripture where it says that there's a vine and there's a vine dresser, and that every branch, right, is torn down or can be removed to make you better. So part of that co-creation process is the fact that there are things that happen to us in life. It's not meant to bury us or to break us down. It's actually meant to get us to that next place that God has called us to be.
And it's about that refinement that you talked about earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Helping us
move
higher, ascend, you know. And what I've learned, because this 2020 was, every year I sort of take some time to reflect about, you know, what I believe God places on my heart to concentrate on and to be intentional about. And 2020 was about ascension. And when I'm given these words, most of the time I'm like, okay, I'll look it up in the dictionary and all this other stuff. But I really don't understand the fullness of what those words mean until I get smack dab in the middle of the year. And I'm like, okay, this is what y'all meant. This is the meaning. And what I've discovered about ascension is it's not necessarily about gains. Because when I first started off the year, I was like, I'm about to ascend. I'm about to ascend to my next level. I'm about to get all of this. My business is about to be this and this and that, you know? But for me, ascension has been more about the shedding of the things that no longer serve me. Because if you want to fly higher, you gotta give some stuff up. You gotta unload some of that baggage, right?
Yeah.
So I think, you know, what I really want to implore people who are watching and listening is that sometimes to get to your next level, you do have to do away with some of those things that won't serve you in your next realm, you know?
And that's a beautiful, particularly for those who are seeking really high places of leadership. Having been in very intense leadership roles, there's a responsibility that comes when you are tasked with moving people, impressing on what they think, guiding them. And part of that process of us getting there is understanding what it feels like in our bodies to be a true leader of self first,
Yes.
before we can be a leader of others. And that means being, like, I think you said it perfectly, being able to die to self, right? So if you're a person or an entrepreneur, business person that is seeking to have global brand notoriety, but you know that there are aspects of you where you ain't too kind all the time, right? Or, in closed doors, you could be a little snippy. Recognize that there'll always be those situations that are coming to correct, refine, and clear that out, because as God elevates you, that means more will see you. Mm-hmm. That means more people will become aware. And it's always God looking for ways to be the center of what we're doing, as opposed to a bystander of what we're doing.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Now, as I mentioned before, we're nearing the end of 2020. And usually, again, around this time, we're really in reflective mode. Those of us who are leaders, entrepreneurs, change makers, thought leaders, we're thinking ahead. And we're also reflecting back on the year. And some of us, really typically under normal circumstances are pushing to end the year strong and are setting our sights on goals for the new year. But some might feel like right now it's impossible to truly plan for the coming year in the midst of this pandemic. And also with all the other things going on in the world. I know that when we first started our conversation, you mentioned taking it day by day. So Dr. Sunne-Ryse, how can we continue to create a life worth living in these moments of incredible uncertainty?
I do a lot of self-work, and I took an amazing course. And one of the things I learned in the course is, when in doubt, focus out. When in doubt, focus out. So as thought leaders prepare and they start thinking about next year, if they take themselves and put themselves towards the back of the question and put others towards the front of the question. What do I mean by that? They want to ask themselves, what is it that I can do? And who is it that I can be for others? Because that's actually going to guide, if you're a thought leader, if you're an entrepreneur, probably the root of your work is others, right, is service to others. And sometimes, and we spoke about this before, about the platform and the notoriety and the fame. Sometimes where people in our industry can get off course is when we make ourselves the main point. Anytime that I've ever gotten off of focus in my career and my business is when I made myself the main point. Oh, I can't do that IG live because my hair isn't done. I can't do that IG live because I don't have the right camera. I can't write that book because, I don't really have the publisher or the money yet. And all of a sudden we become the main point, as opposed to what the main point originally was. If you had an idea to do an IG live, clearly God was calling you to do something and speak to somebody. But the moment you made yourself the main point, there's nowhere to go from there. So as they start to prepare to go into 2021, I recommend that everyone shift the questions that they're asking themselves. Not, God, what can I do? But God, who did you call me to serve? Mm-hmm. And who did you call me to be to serve? Because those questions, those answers will be more fruitful than, what did you call me to do? Because then you're going to get stuck. You're going to get stuck in what 2020 looked like. Yeah. You're going to get stuck in the financial issues. You're going to get stuck in the political concerns. You're going to get stuck in the emotional unrest of what's happening to people that are predominantly in marginalized communities. All of those things will start to overwhelm you. But what will inspire you is when you ask yourselves, God, listen, what can I do for somebody else? Who have you called me to? That produce a completely different result. And I'm hoping that shifting that question is what will have your viewers and your listeners create something really powerful that we'll all see the ripple effect of in 2021.
Yes, I hope the same. Now, I'm so curious because you mentioned you do a lot of work on yourself, as do I. So I want to know, Dr. Sunrise, what did you have to unlearn in order to experience success?
Whew, I had to, girl, you went there with it. Okay, well, here we go. This is real, everybody. So, I had to unlearn that. Oh, this is so funny. Woo, God. I had to truly unlearn this idea that I thought I knew it all. Right? So I grew up in a very, very strong Caribbean family. Anybody who's from the Caribbean, we know that, if you're not a doctor or a lawyer or a nurse or, somebody with a house and 10 jobs, then you haven't really made it, right? And so I'm grateful for the push that my family gave around education and empowering us to kind of have these very high standards. But then, girl, listen, when all those high standards weren't helping a sister be successful, all the degrees in the world, all the resume in the world wasn't helping. I had to unlearn the fact that, arrogance isn't going to take you but so far.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I had to unlearn this idea that the dream and the vision and the purpose does not belong to me. It does not belong to me. And every time, going back to what I said before, every time I made it about me, nothing got done. Nothing. Because I was reverting back to this form of perfection when God only cared about purpose. Many of us are trying to perfect what we do as opposed to be purposeful.
Yes. Yes. It's progress over perfection, right? Because we'll eventually get to a point where it looks perfect to those who are looking from the outside in, so long as we continue to progress. That's what I truly believe. And that's really the root of this show. When I started it, I didn't even have everything that you see here. But I knew what I was led to do. And
Come on.
fast forward, several months later, I get to have these powerful conversations with brilliant Black thought leaders like you, who will undoubtedly, forever change the way that someone looks at their life and their life's work.
Yes.
And that in itself is humbling. So thank you for that.
And that had to come from a place deep down on the inside of you, right? A reservoir deep on the inside of you that got tired of sitting around and watching other people talk about your purpose. So what I mean by that, and I don't mean that's literally you, but this could be to some of your listeners. So many times the idea of perfection stifles the purpose. And you ever have that moment where you're like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. I could do that. But you haven't done it.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't done it. So that thing keeps rising up in you that's like, well, then just do it already. Let's go. Thought leader, you wanted to drop a video about parents and mothers of young Black boys, and you're a teacher, go do it. Stop waiting for someone to co-sign the vision that God has already given you. You only need one co-signer, and if it was God, you good.
That's it.
That's it.
And there will be provision, right? Because I think also, too, a lot of us who have these big purpose-filled missions get caught up in, like you mentioned, the lack. Oh, I don't have the money. I don't have the connections. I don't have, right? But I'm a living witness, and I'm sure that you are as well, that when you step fully into your purpose, the provision, the way is already made. And it's not going to always be apparent when you take that first step. Sometimes you got to take that step and let everything else be revealed to you. And oftentimes, everything else will not be revealed to you until you step out.
Listen, I always say it won't be revealed to you until you step out. Because why would God trust you if you don't trust him?
Ooh.
Why would the universe trust you if you don't trust the universe, right? So there has to be a willingness to take the first step. The other thing to your listeners and your viewers, to help them get past this, because I know some people, they hear and they're like, okay, I need Dr. Sunrise to give me the practical work of this. Here's the practical piece. Do the best you can with what you have, right? When God led me a couple of years ago to start doing spiritual workouts, and I had been let go from my job, my huge job that I referenced, I was an executive, 6-figure salary. Now, mind you, God didn't call me there to stay long. God called me there and he was telling me to do other stuff, but I was getting caught up in the glitz and the glamour of what I had. So as I was removed from that and transitioned from that position, and God called me to start doing these spiritual workouts and these sessions for people, I'm like, well, God, my husband looking at me like, you about to spend more money? Like, girl. He said, girl. He said, we got a mortgage and some groceries. He said, my husband, anybody who meets my husband and I, we do work together, to couples work. And he's hilarious. And he'll tell you in a minute, he said, listen here, sister. He said, well, how come God ain't tell me either? Right? So when he called me to do it, and I made the decision, like I just said, you know what? I could do this out of my house. And I made the decision to do it out of my house. I was working out at a gym, and the owner of the gym, powerful Black sister that I love, she said, girl, she's like, we don't use here on a Sunday afternoon. She's like, come here.
Wow.
Use the gym. All you got to do is bring the chairs. She said, I'll help you set up everything. So I'm telling your viewers that, okay, here's what I would say. We all have this big vision, right? We've dreamt it. We've seen ourselves somewhere. Maybe you've seen yourself on a TED Talk. Maybe you've seen yourself having your own TV show, and you've seen it in the mind's eye. There has to be a starting point. And the starting point is to start where you are with what you have. And if all you have is a free Weebly account and a Zoom, start there. There's another scripture that says, God wants to see if we're faithful with the little.
Yeah.
You faithful with the little, you're going to be blessed with the much. But start where you are with what you have. I started with a free Weebly website and a couple of sessions in my house, and then to a gym. And I've expanded from there to the point now where people come to me and they say, hey, Sunrise, can you do this? Hey, can you do this? But I had to start somewhere. We got to start somewhere.
I agree with that. You have to start somewhere. Now, Dr. Sunrise, this show is called Think Like a Thought Leader, and I would be remiss if we did not include in this conversation at some point the thought leaders that helped equip you on your journey. Who are they?
Wow. Okay, so I have so many, but I would definitely say my mom. My mom taught me how to meditate when I was 5 years old. She taught me how to visualize at the age of 5. And at such a young age, she taught my brothers and I that spiritual law is powerful when you know how to master it. So that's number one. Another thought leader of mine that is just so amazing would be Kevin Ross. So Kevin Ross, amazing man of God out in Sacramento, California. He's out there on bridges and fighting for the community. He's an activist, an author. We met him through my mom, and he looked at my husband and I, and he said, God gave the two of you a gift. He said, but your gift is beyond the four walls of the church. He said, there are people who will never come into a church, but they'll definitely listen to the two of you. And he immediately transformed my limited thinking of where I thought my gifts lied to allow me to understand that gifts don't have walls and limits. And one other would definitely be Sylvia High. She's been a mentor of mine for many, many years. We referenced her earlier in this call. She gave me some tough love. Remember when I told you about the humility piece?
Yeah.
And it took me a while to kind of share that. She was actually the beautiful, beautiful gift that unwrapped that gift for me in front of a room of 110 people, might I add, which was not very comfortable at the time. No. It was not the best way to learn that lesson, but nonetheless, I'm here.
And look at you now. Well,
Amen.
I so appreciate you stopping by the show to offer your knowledge, your wisdom, and your spiritual insight. I'm sure that those who are watching and listening, they should have probably pages and pages of notes because you were dropping so many gems. How can people connect with you, Dr. Sunrise?
Oh, absolutely. They can find me at DocSunne. They could also hit me up at my website, www.drsunneryse.com. So those are the best ways to reach me. www.drsunrise.com and IG, Doc Sunny. I appreciate you. You are an amazing young woman. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. And that's high praise coming from a powerhouse of a woman like yourself. Now, I don't want to end this show without folks knowing where they can go get your latest book, I Am That. So can you talk about where people can go grab that?
Absolutely. They can grab it from my website, which I just mentioned, but it's also, as of November 10th, they can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and anywhere else that books are sold online. They can order their copies there. It is an amazing holiday gift, and I'd like to say it's even better to end the year, right? As we're all preparing to end the year going into 2021, you mentioned this word before, having the tools and the strategies, right? We can declare what we want, we can speak it, but we then also need some tangible tools that will be able to support us in the process to manifesting it.
Dr. Sunrise, you are a thought leader, and I thank you. Now, if you enjoyed this conversation and it inspired you in some way, then please feel free to spread the word by sharing it with someone who you believe needs to see or hear it. And if you love today's show, you'll definitely want to sign up to be notified when I have other insightful conversations to help you build wealth related to your calling by texting me at 404-737-4957. That way, you'll never miss another discussion when it airs, and you'll also periodically receive communication tips to help you position your brand and business as a thought leader in your industry. And finally, in an effort to stay true to our vision and remain unbossed, and unapologetic, we've created the opportunity for those of you who enjoy this transformational content to support us monetarily through Patreon. So for as little as $5 a month, you can invest in a network dedicated to creating programming for the upliftment and enrichment of Black people through media and entrepreneurship. So to patronize us, please visit thinklikeathoughtleader.com and hit that green button that says, let's build this. Or if you're more comfortable doing a one-time contribution instead, you can go ahead and click that blue button, which allows you to give via PayPal. Your monthly or one-time investment will help build a groundbreaking multimedia company that will shift paradigms and empower a generation of leaders and entrepreneurs with thoughtful programming and high-quality content. So, to learn more about how you can donate and how you can patronize us, please visit thinklikeathoughtleader.com, and we thank you so much in advance for your support. That's all for us. Thanks for tuning in.